Welcome to the February 2021 edition of Core Connection. As always, I'm your host, Patrick Bloodgood, and I'll be taking you around the many projects and initiatives that your U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is working on. In this month's episode, we highlight the St. Paul District as they talk about safety on the ice for those of you in the colder northern climates this winter. The Philadelphia District is working along the East Coast in Absecon Island, New Jersey, placing more than 2 million cubic yards of sand along the shore to lower the coastal storm damage risk to the communities on the island. The Engineering with Nature team talks about using mangroves to protect coastal shorelines, and our Engineering Research and Development Center is actively researching ways to restore oyster reefs along the Gulf Coast. Our Southwestern Division gives an overview of the Hurricane Harvey Supplemental Program, which was put into place after Congress passed the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018. And finally, February is Black History Month, and the South Pacific Division Commander, Colonel Kirk Gibbs, talks with U.S. Indo-Pacific Command Chief of Staff, Major General Ronald Clark, about the civil rights movement and the importance of this month's observances. But before we go to those stories and more, this is Core Connection. As we are in the middle of winter, many individuals in our northern climates enjoy a day near or on the ice. Whether it be fishing, snowmobiling, or other activities, enjoying the outdoors in the middle of winter can be a welcome escape from cabin fever. Our St. Paul district has some tips and tricks to keep you safe when you're around a frozen body of water.
The sun is shining, it's a bluebird day, absolutely perfect to be heading out on the ice. My name is Tammy Fraunchu, Park Ranger at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Sandy Lake Dam. Today I want to just take a few moments to talk to you about ice safety and some of the devices that you might want to be taking with you as you're heading out on the ice for the first time this year. So to start off with, one of the things that you want to do is always leave a plan with somebody back on land as to what your goals are for the day. If you're heading out on the ice for an hour, if you're heading out for an entire afternoon, this person is just going to be responsible for making sure that you check back in with them later on in the day. So bringing a cell phone with you is very handy. So after you've left a plan with someone on where you're planning on going for the day, the next thing that you want to bring with you is a life jacket. This may not seem super intuitive because it's winter time. Who wears a life jacket during the winter time? That's a summer thing. But life jackets are really an invaluable tool for any time of the year. So you can either wear a life jacket like I'm wearing over your coat. Otherwise, they also have created something called a float coat, which I have right here. So here we have a float coat, and a float coat looks like a normal jacket, except for it has the additional benefit of having some extra buoyant panels built into it. Float coats are really great because they're not overly bulky like a life jacket here is per se. They're also warm. It's just like wearing your normal winter coat outside, but they do have that additional buoyancy in them. So if you were to fall through the ice, they're going to keep your upper body above the water and you're not going to submerge completely down into that ice cold water. If you're heading out onto the ice for the first time, another valuable tool to bring you with you is an ice chisel. So an ice chisel can be used to test the ice in front of you as you're walking out. You can chisel down to the water level to figure out how deep the ice is. Otherwise, it's just a good tool to be putting out in front of you to make sure that you are not going to hit thin ice as you get a little bit further on in your travels. Also may consider bringing an auger with you. And if you're heading out fishing, chances are you're probably bringing this with you anyways. But the auger allows you to check your ice depth every 10 or 15 feet or so as you're going out onto the ice for the first time. And especially early ice, it's really beneficial to be checking that ice every 15 feet or so just to make sure that it is in fact still safe. It's important to remember that ice is never completely consistent. So just because the ice is maybe 6 inches deep right here, it might only be 3 inches deep out a little bit further, and you could be facing open water even further out. Another really important tool to be bringing with you as you're heading out on the ice are something called ice picks. So I have a pair right here, and what these are, they sit around your neck, and they are basically sharp little ends with handles on them that you can stick into the ice. And as you push these into the ice, those spikes come out. Ice picks, if you were to fall into the water, you can use these to stick into the ice and help pull yourself out, kind of like you're doing a pull-up onto the ice. And finally, we have ice cleats. Ice cleats are a really beneficial thing to be bringing out, especially on new ice when you don't have a lot of snow cover yet. This ice is extremely slippery out here right now, and so if I didn't have ice cleats on, I would be sliding all over the place. And so, though you may always have a risk of falling through the ice, your chances of slipping and falling and hitting your head or breaking a wrist or injuring yourself otherwise are actually really high this time of year when we don't have a lot of snow cover and there's not good traction on the snow. So I definitely recommend bringing a pair of ice cleats with you if you're going out on the ice for the first time as well.
Moving from ice to the waves of the Atlantic Ocean. USACE continues to work to lower the risk of coastal storms along many shorelines throughout the United States. The Philadelphia district is in the middle of a maintenance period for one such project as they work to nourish the beaches along Absecon Island, New Jersey.
The Absecon Island Storm Damage Reduction Project includes over 7 miles of dunes and berm throughout the municipalities of Atlantic City, Ventnor, Margate, and Longport. Initial construction was originally begun in 2004. Under storm damage reduction projects, the dune is the primary feature that is protecting the infrastructure and community from severe flooding and damages during storms. Periodic nourishment is critical to maintain that dune and the berm in front of it to protect it from the smaller storms that may come, so that when a large coastal storm comes, that dune is protected. We'll be placing over 2 million cubic yards of sand during this periodic renourishment contract, and every 3 years we'll be back to place anywhere between 1 and 2 million cubic yards as necessary to maintain the project. You see over my shoulder, the dredge material is being pumped from offshore, from the hopper dredge, onto the shore. It's a slurry, so it's made up of mostly water with a large sand content. As you see, the material comes out as darker material because it's been sitting in the bottom of the ocean for a long time. As the sunlight gets it and it aerates, it turns back to the normal color that we all expect to see on our beach. You also see a bunch of large dozers, D8s, D9s, that move the sand around. Those dozers wait for the slurry to come out, the water runs back into the ocean, and the sand stays on shore. Those dozers' job is to shape the material into the design construction template to make sure that we are maintaining the berm widths and dune heights that the design calls for. The way that the beach fill is run, they have multiple lines. So they'll have a high line and a low line. So when the water comes and slurry comes up on shore, it actually gets valved at a Y valve, and they can direct it to the upper beach or the lower beach to more efficiently build out the profile. We have a lot of experience out here. Bill and Mandeep have done numerous beach fills, and their partnership with the contractor is what makes this project successful from our standpoint. So it's a great project. We're very proud of the fact that we can do these projects to reduce the damages from coastal storms for the people of New Jersey and in terms of the Corps of Engineers throughout the country.
Work is expected to be completed later this winter. In addition to the beach nourishment, USACE is looking to other natural ways to combat the effects of coastal storms. Researchers are looking at trees found along many southern shorelines as a way to reduce risk while improving the local ecology.
Waves are a defining characteristic of the seashore and a source of recreation to beachgoers, but they can also cause significant damage during extreme storms, drastically eroding sediment while pounding the shore relentlessly. Such storms can also carry waves much farther inland, bringing severe flooding and destroying near-coast houses and infrastructure. One possible nature-based solution being examined to mitigate the effects of severe coastal events is mangroves.
The benefits of coastal mangroves are that they reduce wave energy and trap sediment, which helps to reduce storm impacts inland and prevent erosion of the shoreline. They also serve as a valuable habitat for coastal life.
Furthermore, these trees block wind across the water's surface, preventing waves from reforming. Studies have shown that mangroves can reduce the height of waves by as much as 66%. Hoping to maximize this natural fortification, researchers from the U.S. Army Engineer Research and Development Center and the U.S. Naval Academy are collaborating to learn more about how to most effectively use mangroves to reduce coastal damage caused by waves. This innovative project is part of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Engineering with Nature initiative, which supports more sustainable water resources outcomes by intentionally aligning natural and engineering processes.
So mangroves provide a critical ecological and engineering service that needs to be quantified so that districts and the nation can make educated decisions and optimized designs. Both the ecological and engineering benefits provided by mangroves is dependent on the hydrodynamic processes that occur within a mangrove forest. Past research conducted on mangroves were done at smaller scales, which limits the interpretation of results for coastal storms.
Oftentimes, the greatest challenge in collecting mangrove field data has been their environment.
Mangroves typically live along the boundary between land and sea in low-energy, salty environments that can be difficult to access, instrument, and monitor. This, coupled with the intermittency of high-energy events like tropical storms, reduces the likelihood of capturing hydrodynamics during critical events. This lends itself to using a physical model. Another case for using a physical model is in the laboratory, we can create a very controlled system to investigate the effects of specific parameters like stem density. This allows us to eliminate some of the inherent uncertainty and variability associated with field studies.
The research team employed a multidisciplinary approach in order to replicate those field-like conditions.
We wanted to build a diverse group of researchers with backgrounds in coastal waves, physical modeling, and coastal ecology to help plan and build a physical model that would capture critical hydrodynamics. So this model spans the water levels and waves typical of the day-to-day environment and higher energies associated with storms. Smaller scale studies struggle to capture both effectively and have issues when scaling up to a real-world system. The data collected in this model will be used to fill our knowledge gaps and provide engineering guidance for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
The research team had to consider many variables in the creation of its near-scale model.
Anytime you build a mimic of a natural system, you want to make sure that you're going to capture meaningful data. So you have to get the geometry correct and the physics correct, but you have to do so at an affordable cost, right? So ultimately we have to balance the cost and the scale with the getting data that can drive decisions. First thing we did was we went out and we reviewed the documentation on mangroves in the United States. We looked at stem diameter, prop roots, the number of stems in a given area, and ultimately that helped us assess, okay, how do mangroves grow in the United States? And we also used data from the U.S. Naval Academy to assess the structural properties of mangroves. And using this data, we were able to go through and look at the common building materials that would give us similar properties. And ultimately, that makes it affordable.
This research can benefit society because if we understand the performance of these natural systems, then we can effectively leverage this infrastructure to protect our coastal communities and also find a cost-effective way to mitigate flood damage.
Moving from shorelines to now subaquatic, oysters along the Gulf Coast have been impacted heavily from environmental disasters, overharvesting, and disease. USACE's Engineering Research and Development Center is looking at how best to restore the local bivalves.
We are looking at experimentally trying to determine how to create oyster reefs and restore oyster reefs so that we have healthy, productive reefs in the Gulf Coast system. So oyster reefs in the Gulf have been hit by fisheries, by commercial uses, but also by environmental issues like hurricanes and, of course, by oil spills. And we'd like to look at different ways to restore the reefs themselves and to create them in different ways so that we can understand how to make the ecosystem healthy again. And we'd also like to see how that healthy ecosystem might have positive impacts on Gulf sturgeon habitat and Gulf sturgeon food and the Gulf sturgeon population. Healthy reef ecosystems are good for everyone. One, they can provide some protection to the shoreline. They can bring more fish and oysters that folks love to eat, and other fish that rely on the oyster habitat. They help to filter the water so they can improve water quality. And if they are successfully helping the Gulf sturgeon population, then there are halo effects that could be seen across the Gulf wide. What's interesting about this project is that we're going to have large-scale reefs for this type of experiment. We're going to have 1 acre reef leases that are replicated 8 different times at 2 locations. So we'll have a large footprint that has smaller 1 acre reefs on it, and then we'll do our experiments on those reefs. The goals are to make some progress in oyster restoration in the Gulf, to understand how to get productive or more productive oyster reef habitat through restoration practices, and how to look at how that's connected to Gulf sturgeon habitat and Gulf sturgeon populations. At ERDIC, we know that we really can't do all our work ourselves. We need to rely on the community around us, both other federal partners, academic partners, and private and public partners. For this particular project, we are in close collaboration with the University of Southern Mississippi and Dr. Reed Hendon, who is the director of the Gulf Coast Research Lab, has been coordinating that collaboration with us.
The research missions of USM and ERDIC Environmental Lab are very much aligned, and it makes complete sense for us to be working on this type of project that involves coastal ecology and coastal restoration, as well as Gulf sturgeon, which are both key focal areas for both USM and the Environmental Lab. So there are 2 endpoints that we want to get to with this particular project. The first one being what is the best way for us to do restoration here in Mississippi, along the coast and throughout that southeastern United States. Secondly, what are the potential impacts of these type of restoration activities on threatened and endangered species, in this case being Gulf sturgeon. We will be monitoring habitat use in those areas, tagging Gulf sturgeon, monitoring how they use that particular area prior to the reefs going in, and then we'll continue to monitor that throughout the life of the project, which is going to answer a key question not only here at the state level but also at the federal level, is to what degree do these type of restoration activities influence Gulf sturgeon habitat use.
We hope that there is no impact and that actually there's a benefit to Gulf sturgeon through the creation of these reefs. There's the potential that productivity around the reefs as a result of the oysters will increase benthic or small organisms in the substrate around that, which is what Gulf sturgeon feed on. So hopefully it will provide a better habitat for Gulf sturgeon. So if you create this stable structure over time, additional fish will colonize that area and hopefully that fishery will improve. That's important for both commercial and recreationally important species within the Mississippi Sound. It's a really unique opportunity for us to collaborate with a large breadth of technically sound folks, and I'm really excited about the opportunities.
And staying with the Gulf Coast, Hurricane Harvey ravaged parts of Texas, Louisiana, and areas of the country further inland in 2017. The impacts of the storm are still visible to this day. The districts making up USACE's Southwestern Division are actively working on projects to address the aftermath of this historic storm through the Hurricane Harvey Supplemental Program. And Jordan McCulley gives us an overview on what the program entails.
Hurricane Harvey made landfall in August of 2017, devastating the Texas coast and causing $125 billion in damage. In response, and after Congress passed the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018, which provided emergency supplemental funding to respond to Harvey and other natural disasters, the Southwestern Division established the Hurricane Harvey Supplemental Program. The program is comprised of 40 projects located throughout the Southwestern Division's Fort Worth, Galveston, Little Rock, and Tulsa districts.
The Southwestern Division's $5.2 billion Hurricane Harvey Supplemental Program consists of 4 types of projects. The first type addressed immediate repairs to already existing flood risk reduction structures. These included repairs to levees, flood walls, pump stations, and erosion along channels. We also have projects addressing damage of navigation channels. Dredging and removing shoaled material was a critical action to reopening our navigation channels. Through the program, we are also constructing new flood risk reduction measures. These projects include the construction of levees, detention basins, drainage channels, pump stations, and other critical supporting infrastructure. The last types of projects include studies that identify and evaluate comprehensive flood risk reduction measures. Specifically, there are studies along the Texas coast, the Houston metro area, and the Tulsa-West Tulsa levee system.
For more information about the Hurricane Harvey Supplemental Program, please visit www.swd.usace.army.mil.
Southwestern Division's website is in the notes below if you are interested in more information about the Hurricane Harvey Supplemental Program. As I said at the beginning of the episode, February is Black History Month, and in January we celebrated Martin Luther King Day. Colonel Kirk Gibbs, the Pacific Ocean Division commander, got a chance to speak with Major General Ronald Clark, the U.S. Indo-Pacific Chief of Staff, about Martin Luther King Day and what it means to him as an African-American senior leader in the Army.
General Clark, thank you for joining us for this Martin Luther King Jr. observance.
Kirk, I'm a big fan of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, so it's an absolute honor to be a part of today's discussion. Thank you for having me.
Sir, the honor is all ours. Today, we're here in Hawaii on Ford Island at one of the 3 memorials of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, where nearly 2,400 U.S. personnel died and are remembered.
And some might wonder what this somber moment in U.S. military history has to do with the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. Amidst countless heroic tales that followed from that day is the story of a Black American sailor and national war hero, 22-year-old Doris Miller. You see, racial integration within the military at the time was at a low point, and Black Americans weren't allowed to hold combat positions in the Navy. But for a moment, that day, it changed on December 7th.
That's right, sir. In the moments after the attack, although a cook, Miller manned anti-aircraft guns, despite having no training. He also tended to the wounded. His actions saved countless lives. He was eventually awarded the Navy Cross, first for a Black American. Though a great honor, such an action was deserving of the Medal of Honor. Afterwards, he continued to serve, and eventually perishing aboard the Liscombe Bay during the Battle of Macon on November 24, 1943.
Yet Dory Miller's life and legacy stoked the fires of the Civil Rights Movement, which would again gain momentum 14 years later with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
And now, sir, nearly 80 years later, there are countless other stories of Black Americans, those of renown and those lesser known, who helped pave the road to progress. Sir, I know your story exemplifies this progress.
It truly does. I'd love to share it with you all. Let's take a walk. Kirk, thank you for allowing me to tell my story at an appropriate social distance.
Yes, sir. We do what we can do.
Thanks. I guess I'd start my story really as a story of standing on the shoulders of giants. Those giants being my parents, who grew up in rural South Louisiana, graduated high school in 1963. That's important because during that time frame, because of the laws on the books in our country, there are places where they could not shop, they could not try on clothing in a clothing store, there are drinking fountains they couldn't use, restrooms that they couldn't use based on the color of their skin. So my father, who had 2 brothers who preceded him in the Army, decided to join the Army in 1964, which is important because that's the year the Civil Rights Act was passed. Great work by Dr. King and a number of others to make that dream a reality. And upon joining the United States Army, my father became a food service specialist. So I feel a personal and professional connection to Doris Miller.
Yes, sir.
In that. So my parents my mom became a school teacher and then a principal and then served on the school board in our hometown of Leesville, Louisiana. And my father went on to a 28-year career of service as a non-commissioned officer, retiring as a master sergeant in 1992. Interestingly, my dad and I served in the Army together for 4 years, which a lot of fun. Great stories with that. So my own story really revolves around understanding the importance of service above self and the opportunities that Dr. King describes as his dream being an American dream that we could achieve through service to our nation. So I've been fortunate to wear the cloth of the nation for 33 years. And it really all started when I had a conversation with my father about coming into the Army when I was a junior in high school. And he wanted to open the aperture for me to understand all the opportunities that were available because I did not want my parents to have to pay for me to attend school. After that discussion with my parents present, I decided that West Point would be a viable option and solution to the problem at hand, and I ended up attending and graduating from West Point in 1988.
That is just really cool. Thank you so much for sharing that story.
And I really appreciate you asking because again, it's those conversations that we don't generally get an opportunity to have until an opportunity presents itself, such as Martin Luther King Jr.'s day and observance, that it gives us the chance to sit down and to have discussions about the opportunities that we all have that our service and the service of others will allow.
Yes, sir. Sir, thank you. What an incredible inspiration and a call to action. Thank you for sharing your story and thoughts. As I reflect upon our nation's own story, it's easy to often feel disheartened by the history of slavery and the struggle for basic civil rights. But I think we all try to find stories and symbols that give us hope, such as the banyan tree. As we all know, most trees grow roots from the ground up. Their strength and survival depend on the solid foundation the root system provides during early stages. If a tree's roots aren't strong, the tree can topple during a storm. But the banyan tree right here is different. A banyan tree seed takes root within the cracks of other trees, growing over, around, and within it. Its branches are its roots, and they grow from the top down, gaining strength and resilience even if the original tree's root system was weak.
And much like the banyan tree, our nation can gain strength through each branch, the people of our incredible United States. Our nation's foundation contained cracks in terms of equality and civil rights, but now, new dreams, like those of Dr. King, can take root even now, and growing strong enough to weather any storm.
Sir, what do you think this looks like for most Americans and our 36,000 USACE employees watching across the globe?
Well, Kirk, that's a great question. And I would start by, again, going back to the words of Dr. King, who stated, and I'll paraphrase, that we must learn to be brothers and sisters or perish as fools. So if we think about some of the challenges we currently face with racial inequality, with political strife, with income inequality, and any of a number of ails, COVID-19, currently in our country, what we must have the courage to do is to speak to one another from a position of trust so that we can build relationships that matter. And in accordance with Dr. King's dream, again, learn to live as brothers and sisters.
Yes, sir. Trust. That's always a key word for me as well. I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you for those words of wisdom, sir. I couldn't agree more. Without action, dreams are simply wishes. And even during a pandemic, a simple action could be a conversation, just like the one we're having here today. Another way to make progress is by learning the lessons of history. Since we're just a few steps away, I'd like to invite you over to this lookout point right over here.
Thanks. The U.S.-Arizona Memorial is an active U.S. military cemetery and the final resting place for 1,102 sailors and Marines who were killed on December 7, 1941 during the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Japan has memorials for their citizens as well. Just a few years after the attack, the United States detonated 2 nuclear weapons over the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. the bombings killed between 129,000 and 226,000 people, mostly civilians.
The end of World War II cast a long shadow over international relations. The journey from enemies to allies between the United States and Japan seemed impossible after so much hurt, so much loss. Yet today, the impossible has been realized. Japan is one of America's closest allies, having formed an unshakable bond forged through blood, sweat, and tears, but most of all through humble repentance and forgiveness.
There's so much to learn from this dark chapter in history. In Japan, the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is honored in Hiroshima. Today, Japanese leaders impress upon their citizens the importance of electoral politics and nonviolent social change. A former mayor even borrowed from King's speech during a tree exchange between the United States and Japan, saying that he had a dream of diverse people and trees gathered together.
Today, as the United States fluctuates between civil unrest and progress, we too can forge new dreams. Dreams built on the legacy of people like Dory Miller, Dr. King, and many more. We can also listen to personal stories from leaders like General Clark and build new, strong roots through personal action. We can learn from the lessons of history to build a better future.
While our past is marred by suffering in the civil rights movement, there's immense hope for tomorrow. Dr. King's legacy lives on through each of us.
General Clark, thank you so much for being part of today's conversation and for all you do to spread the message of hope.
Thank you, Kirk. It's been my honor.
So even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream.
Colonel Jason Kelly, Commander, South Atlantic Division, headquartered here in Atlanta, Georgia. Many of the streets in Atlanta pay homage to giants of our civil rights movement, as this was once the spiritual home of that movement. Our headquarters, situated at the intersection of King and Forsyth Street, is a reminder of Dr. King's contributions to our great nation. Each day, when I come into work, I'm reminded of those contributions, reminded of the fact that I'm personally a benefactor of his great work. It is my hope that on this day, as we pause to remember him, you all will think about contributions you can make to the continued betterment of our great nation.
I believe Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s message of how he wanted us to treat each other was optimistic. He dreamt of unity and equality for all people, fighting against prejudice and racism. He showed many examples of peaceful protest and marching for justice that is relevant now more than ever. The demand for justice and equality is not over yet. We must continue to march forward and seek peace as Dr. King would have us all to do.
I believe Martin Luther King is a symbol of hope and change around the world because of his intelligence and leadership throughout the civil rights movement. There was hundreds of people who contributed to the civil rights movement. But when Martin Luther King took the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and gave his I Have a Dream speech, it catapulted our world into a direction that has led to the change and diversity that we have today.
Because change needed to happen back then, and change needs to happen still to this day. The Reverend Martin Luther King was a passionate speaker and a compassionate visionary. He sacrificed himself, oftentimes putting himself in danger, being attacked in public and sometimes at home, to speak out against racial inequalities, all for the greater good of the people, and all the while preaching nonviolence. Martin Luther King is an inspiration and a beacon of hope for many.
Remember, Dr. King's movement was one of nonviolence, marching, boycotting, and making public appearances in order to educate everyone, and yet he still met with violence. Celebrate our diversity and the progress that we've made. Act to make a career of helping others, giving of yourself selflessly, and get involved in community service. Each one, reach one.
Mr. King stood and fought for justice and righteousness in our country. His day to me is a reminder to do the same in my role as a husband, father, friend, and federal employee. This means teaching my young daughter how to play well with others and to share, a reminder for me to listen well to others and be generous with my time and resources, and to do this consistently every day with the hope that I become a better person, that my family becomes better and my community better and my country as a whole better. Thank you.
If you look at the climate then, seeing as how that, he was an African-American man, speaking the way that he did, carrying himself the way that he did, with such dignity and poise, but he preached or spoke peace and equality amongst everyone. It wasn't totally subjective suggested just to one group of people. It was for all people. And how that can inspire, it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter how you look. If you believe strongly in something, yes, you can incite change. And if you can get others to believe, if you can get others to hope for a better future or a more peaceful future, then the opportunities are endless, regardless of where you come from.
So if I were to meet or have the opportunity to speak to Martin Luther King Jr., I think I would apologize and say we haven't made the progress that I think you were hoping we would. But I think we need to listen better, not with our ears, but with our hearts. And maybe we're moving in the right direction, much slower than I think you had hoped. So slow progress, but I hope that we're getting there.
If I could talk to Dr. King today, I would tell him thank you for his sacrifice and for his leadership in helping our nation realize the goals and principles of our founding fathers, in that all men are created equal, that all of us are endowed with the unalienable right to life, liberty, to the pursuit of happiness. I would tell him, we're not quite there yet, but without him, we would be far away from where we are now. So thank you very much, Dr. King.
I am B.J. Fagan, Chief of Resource Management. I was 18 when Dr. King was assassinated. For me, the decade of the 60s was filled with frustration, anger, and the feelings of a restless country. It seemed that there was opposition to anyone that was trying to make social change. For me, Dr. King represented hope that things would get better for all people who were oppressed and were being treated unfairly. His words were, I have a dream that one day one's race would not matter, and we would all be treated as equals. It's been 58 years, and I'm still searching for that hope. Dr. King has inspired me to never give up on trying to make a difference, to not only be kind to others, but to find the kindness that exists in others. I honor Dr. King by not seeing differences based on how we look, and living my life based on his ideals of equality and human rights for all.
I would say, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., thank you so much for being the leader that you are. I would say thank you for showing the world that no matter where you're from, your ethnicity, your backgrounding, your culture differences, we all should love one another, support one another, respect one another, and be honest to one another and equal to one another.
I'm Beth Fabrica, Jacksonville District Counsel. As a legal professional, it's interesting to consider Dr. King's commitment to changing the law and how legal decisions during and after his lifetime continued to advance his mission. But although civil rights litigation was very important, Dr. King's work was much bigger. He harnessed the power of social justice and action to implement change. I am inspired by Dr. King's commitment to justice, equality, and truth. I look forward to continuing to learn, listen, and grow as we celebrate his legacy.
So why do I believe Dr. Martin Luther King has become a symbol of hope and change around the world? As an LGBTQ American, as well as a Cuban American growing up in Miami, what Dr. King accomplished in his life of service symbolizes a great deal of things to me. You see, until Dr. King, Miami, like many places in the country in the 1950s, was deeply segregated. When my family arrived in Miami from Havana in 1959, stores, diners, and hotels openly displayed signs reading, "No blacks, no Jews, no Cubans" in their windows. Without Dr. King and the fight for equality eventually defeating that kind of raw, entrenched segregation, Miami wouldn't have blossomed into the beautiful international rainbow city that it is today. Because of Dr. King's force of will and his profound commitment to the struggle for civil rights, Miami began embracing the Cuban exile community so that today, people of many nations and races thrive in a truly international city. None of that would have been possible without Dr. King and the men and women like him who bravely fought against entrenched political and even violent power for civil rights and economic rights. And as an LGBTQ American, Dr. King's fight for civil rights directly led to Stonewall, and the fight for equal treatment under the law for gay Americans that was led by Harvey Milk and others across our country. What Dr. King started eventually made its way both in the repeal of the Department of Defense's Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy and the Supreme Court's legalization of same-sex marriage. My right to live as a free citizen of our beautiful nation is deeply rooted in Dr. King's lifelong struggle for civil rights for all Americans, and my only wish is that Dr. King were alive today to see the fruits of the labor he bore. Thank you.
So that does it for this month's Core Connection. We hope you enjoyed the episode. I'll be back here next month with more highlights from around USACE, including some stories about how USACE celebrated Engineers Week, which is coming up between February 21st and February 27th. Follow our channel and be sure to check out the channels of the local districts as they highlight the contributions our engineers make to our great nation each day. For now, I'm Patrick Bloodgood, and this has been Core Connection.